You have a cup of tea or anything? I do.
I'm just drinking water, but I don't know how clean the New York City water is, but
it's the best in the country.
There we go.
And I got my buddy Oakley next to me. So
Oakley's the dog. Hi, Oakley. How are you? Okay. So the broadcast is live. It's public. Well, I guess we might as well begin because we're going to have to we're going to record this and post this anyway, so it'll get used later if it's no views now. So let's do that one second, my friend.
Lauren says it sounds. Let me see.
Looks and sounds okay. Let's see here. Bear with me, my friend. We'll get going right away. Is Lauren on it?
Yep.
Is that go?
Do
you think we should wait a little while? It would come up here.
Might turn this way just so that you can see a quieter wall.
There we go. Good idea. I can get cracking on here.
Oh, you want to come here?
There we go. Good. Can you come forward a little bit?
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, she's on, but
okay, she's on. So, all right, here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first live episode of Mental Health Marvels on the air with Kevin Hines and friends. Eric Kussin is the founder and creator of the Same Here global mental health movement. We're All a Little Crazy is a movement about hope, healing, and recovery from mental pain. He's a tremendously effective advocate and a great friend of mine. Please welcome Eric Kussin. And Eric, what is cracking, homie? What's going on?
Not much, man. Obviously, all in a pretty interesting time right now. So I think what's so helpful and awesome is to get together with people that you have a relationship with the way that we do. I know we'll go into that, but times like these, feeling a connectivity towards people, especially with the social distancing that everyone's talking about, this is the best way we can do it. So it makes sense for us to do it as often as we can, help each other and help other people out there.
I totally agree, and I think we hear this term now in the aftermath of the pandemic, social distancing, when really it needs to be physical distancing, and socially we need to be connecting. Socially, we need to be connecting right here like we are today online, while we may be physically disconnected for a certain period of time due to the pandemic, COVID-19, otherwise known as the coronavirus. So, it's fascinating how people are taking this, but I live with anxiety and stress and bipolar disorder. Those are my diagnoses, but really I call that brain pain. And I know, Eric, you have a phenomenal story of triumph over great adversity. I'd like us to start there. I'd like to start with your story, and I'll kind of interject where I can, but I'm fascinated by you. And when I heard your story for the first time, when we met for the first time, can you break all of that down?
Yeah, so let's start with us meeting, and then I'm going to be going back and forth in different time frames, so certainly stop me. By the way, I love the fact that you're really dissecting the term social distancing, because in this space, how much do we talk about how the slightest change in terms really affect us and really affect the way in which people think about this topic. And so you're absolutely right. It's not about social distancing. It's about physical distancing, because we can be really close in a social way on the computer right now. I think we all get into this advocacy work, most of us who do it from a genuine standpoint, because we had lived experiences. And your wife had reached out to me, seeing some of the work that I had been doing on LinkedIn, of all platforms. And that's the beauty of social media. Obviously, there's some downsides of social media. The beauty of social media is you're on different channels sharing your story. Different people see it in different places. And so amazingly, like very shortly after your wife, Margaret, connected with me, the three of us met at a bar in New York City and had such an incredible connection from the beginning. I know I give you a hard time that you were eating the gluten-free pizza at a bar that has like the greatest pizzas in the world. But I think what happened in that moment, before we go into my story, I think what everyone should understand and know is that there was this kinship there between the three of us, because when you share passions about helping people, and I think you notice that right away with people, whether there's that genuine desire to help others, or whether someone's in it because it's the hot topic, or because you're able to get more followers, or whatever the motivation is. when you're sitting across from someone, or some people in this case, as I was with the two of you, and it's something that you really want to help other people with, and that's what your driving force, you can sit and talk with people for hours upon hours, and that connection remains, and you probably would never get off the phone or in person with someone. So I don't know how you felt about that dinner, but to me, it was pretty amazing what happened that first night we met.
It was amazing. I will tell you that when I met you for the first time, I was having a really bad manic episode. So it was hard for me to focus on the moment at hand and be in the present. I did the best I could, I think. And I think you experienced a good side of me, but not the best. And I was honored to meet you and make your acquaintance. My wife was the same, and we were glad to connect so we could further the conversation and come to a place where we are today, where we want to work together, do things together for the common good of other people who are in mental pain, brain pain, as I call it, and get them to a space where they're fighting through the pain to survive every day, and not just survive, but to find ways to thrive in spite of what they're going through. And I think that that's something that we can talk about, with COVID-19, the coronavirus, is that people are living in fear. They're panicked. This is a literal pandemic where, San Francisco is shut down. Governors all over the country are shutting down everything but shopping supermarkets, and it is a time that is new to us, to most of us. It's different. It's somewhat anxiety driven, and we have to come back to a calm. We have to come back to a cool and calm, collected head so we can move forward with the people we love in our homes, and make sure that if you don't have the virus, you're keeping safe.
Absolutely. And I think, what's interesting is we're going to share our stories. It's something that you and I were talking about earlier today when we had this idea to get together, is what we've experienced with what you're calling mental pain. And the reason why I share that this is a topic for 5 and 5, because believing that mental health lives on this continuum, and all of us deal with mental pain to different levels at different points in our lives, is when you felt it to a certain point, what you felt is very similar to what the world is feeling right now, because situationally what we are all going through, with the lack of understanding of what tomorrow is going to look like, what 2 weeks are going to look like, what 2 months from now are going to look like, combined with the lack of a routine and therefore the lack of purpose. People feel lost right now. And the fascinating thing about that is, in talking with advocates like you who have a lived experience, Robin Lerner, who we do a lot of work with, the goalie from the Golden Knights now in the NHL, is those of us who've been through periods of mental health challenges where it's been what I would say a further end of the spectrum, we've felt many of these feelings on our own without it being something situationally going on in our lives. So what we're able to impart with how we were able to survive through those times and continue on will hopefully help people. And so I know you're asking me to share my story. Happy to go into it. I don't want people to think it's about my story today. Maybe my story gives some context to why then you and I are sharing about today moving forward, right? Here's what I went through. Your story, obviously very well known, and been out there for 20 years now. For me, and please chime in, Kevin, if I go on too long, and stop me. But I was working in professional sports for 15 years, and I was living what I thought was my dream life at the time. I had my dream job. I was a single dude going to different markets, enjoying myself, meeting new people. And my most recent position, which was with the Florida Panthers down in Sunrise, I rose to this level that was called Chief Revenue Officer. And when you're rising the ranks in sports, you're moving to different cities for different teams. And my ultimate goal was to be a team president. So now I'd gotten to this point with the Panthers where I'm one step away from this team president's role. And I'm doing fine for the first 6 months there. We're hiring a new staff. We just had a new owner who brought us all in. And I start to notice that I'm losing interest in things outside of the office. So no longer interested in seeing friends, going to the gym, going on dates, watching my teams on TV. And I think a lot of people will relate to this, is that I justified those feelings in my mind by saying, well, this is the world's way of telling me my work is so important. I'm still able to focus on my work, so I'll just put even more energy and attention into that. And all that was an excuse, because I didn't know any better, and I didn't know for mental health. I didn't know what those things escaping my mind meant. And so about 2 weeks went by feeling that lack of connection towards anything other than my work. And I all of a sudden woke up one morning and I had to push myself off my bed. Felt like I was in quicksand. And I walked over to my closet and it felt like I was walking with cinder blocks on my feet.
Wow.
And what we start to do when our brain starts to fail us, and I'm sure you've had experiences like this, Kevin, many times, we've talked about it, is I started to test my brain to see whether it was functioning correctly or not. So my first test was looking at my niece's pictures, because my nieces are the most important people in the world to me. And I could remember their first names, Rebecca and Kaylee, and I couldn't remember their middle names. And that was such a fear invoking situation for me, that here I am, someone who, these are two people that I love so much, their names should be top of my mind, and I can't even access those memories, I guess, if you'll call them, but that knowledge.
Yeah.
Did you have something to say about
No, keep going. I'm fascinated by the story. I'm moved by your words. Please continue. So
I go into the office that day after kind of scrounging a little bit. I think what happens oftentimes is when we start to have mental health failures, though, that I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I'm thinking maybe I have a brain tumor. Maybe when playing sports growing up all these years, I had a traumatic brain injury, and now this is just finally coming to fruition where I'm having these challenges. And so I go into the office and I'm sitting at my desk looking at my computer. My staff is out there. We have a wall window, and I can't make sense of anything that's going on. For those of you who are old enough to remember the game Light Brights, my computer felt like it was light brights in front of me. Like I couldn't make sense of any of the emails that were coming in. And my office felt like Grand Central Station, even though it wasn't that busy. I had people coming in and out saying, Eric, can you come to this meeting? Eric, we need this answer on this project. And I just kept saying to people, I'm on the other phone, or I've got another call I've got to take. And that was really, really challenging because I couldn't focus in the moment. And where it came to a head was that night we had prospects in the building. And the prospects that came in, I usually would give a speech about the direction that our team is going in. It would come from the heart, very much like this. And the prospects came in. Fortunately, my team president was there. He'll remember this, a guy named Matt Caldwell. And in that speech, I just got up there and my mind went completely blank. And what started to happen was I spoke, but not many words came out. I said, this is Eric Kussin. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for the Florida Panthers. It's great to have you. This is our team president, Matt Caldwell. And I walked out of the suite because I had nothing left. There was nothing coming to my mind whatsoever. And I was fortunate enough that my owners, who now are getting good press in the news because they were one of the first teams to offer that they were going to pay their part-time staff during this period now where arena workers aren't able to work. A gentleman by the name of Vinny Viola, was the owner of our team, military background. And I went to him and I said, Vinny, I'm not being a good employee for you. I'm not being a good human being for myself. Something is going on right now. I don't know what it is, but I need to take time off. And I'm scared shitless about my job. I don't know. And I'm scared shitless about my health. And he looked me in the eye, and this is the closest I'll ever get, I guess, to feeling what it's like to be surrounded by military members. He was with our team president, who's also a West Point grad. And he said, Eric, we never leave a soldier out on the battlefield. Take as much time as you need, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, come back and hit the ground running. Now, when we hear 3 months and we've never had mental health education in school, because we didn't in the 80s and 90s, I thought to the commercials that I've seen on TV, where I see a person who's a cartoon character with a sad face and a cloud above their head, and then beautiful music comes on 15 seconds into the commercial, they take a pill, that pill gets them better, and then the gray cloud goes away, the blue sky comes, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and the person's smiling. So I thought of antidepressants as they probably work the way that an antibiotic works. So when my team owner is telling me I have 3 months to come back, that was the time frame that was ingrained in my mind. I'm thinking, how can I not get better in 3 months? I'll definitely get better in 3 months. I'll try a bunch of different medications. Worst case scenario, after a couple fail, one will eventually work. And I wish that's how the story went, although maybe not, because maybe this awful period was the best thing to happen to me in my life is I came back to New York, where my family's from, twin bed that I grew up in. That's where I laid down because I didn't have anywhere else to go. And in this dysfunctional state, for 2.5 years, I laid horizontal, staring at a ceiling with what I described as having no original thoughts coming to my brain. No desire to eat anything, no watching TV, no listening to the radio, no listening to podcasts, barely answering my friends' text messages. And it wasn't that I, was fearful of sharing this with anyone. My brain literally was shut off as these doctors tried over 50 different psychotropic drug combinations on me. By the way, I want to make sure that I make this point across. I'm not anti-drugs, but the challenge that I had was, and I think this is what a lot of people might deal with, is I thought of drugs because of those commercials that I'd seen as a cure, and that I just needed to find the right combination of cures, just like antibiotics help us to get better from strep throat or bronchitis. When we take them 2 or 3 days and we sleep, we feel better. I thought I needed the right set of combination of drugs. That's why for 2.5 years, I laid horizontal in that bed 99% of the time, 1% of the time being going to doctors and being prescribed a new set of SSRIs, SNRIs, MAOIs, tricyclics. And so, the 2.5 years go by, I don't get any better. It's then recommended I do TMS therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they shoot electromagnetic waves into your brain. I do 23 sessions straight of that for 23 days, and I can't fall asleep the next night. Next day comes, can't fall asleep again. My doctor says, stay at home. Let's see if you could rest it out. This is the first time in my life I had ever developed the concept of a suicidal ideation. So I'm looking at this bottle of pills on my counter, filled bottle of pills that had just been refilled. And the only thoughts that are going through my mind is swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. And I can't stop it from playing on repeat. And I'm sitting on my hands, and people who've had suicidal ideations can relate to this, but hopefully if you haven't had it, you can understand what it feels like. Is your mind is telling you one thing, and your heart, almost in a way, which is controlling another part of your brain, is telling you don't want to do this, and it's not something you want to go through with. So I'm sitting there feeling this magnetic pull towards the pills, sitting on my hand saying, I don't want to do this. For 2.5 years, I've been fighting not to do this. And so fortunately, my parents were home, and I said something to them, and we went voluntarily to Cornell Med, which is a hospital in the city, and I was admitted to a psych ward, which is a very scary term to still say this day. I think it comes with a lot of negative connotations.
But the best case scenario in that moment in time, because you were in danger from yourself.
No question.
I think that's really important. It's really important for the people on the feed who have lost someone to suicide, and I know you're on there because you're writing notes right now and you're commenting. We love you. We're sorry for what you lost. And there was someone that, just to briefly cut in, there was someone that commented that they just keep asking the question, why? And that's what we do as human beings. We keep asking the question, why? It's a normal thing to do. It makes sense. Some of us are angry and upset with the person that passed away by suicide, died by suicide from lethal emotional pain. But one of the questions we need to begin asking ourselves is not why, but how. How do we look to the living and find a way to move forward? I don't mean move on. I don't ever believe that anyone can move on from a suicide. I think that's impossible, because grief is something that, when you lose someone you love by any means necessary, it is devastating. If you love that person unconditionally, it is forever. It is perpetual. But we can find a way to move forward with the how do we look to the living to move forward, not on, but forward, to see that there's still beauty in life. There's still beauty in existence. There's still people in your life that you can love even harder to make sure that they're safe. And you have to recognize that nobody's suicide was our fault. They didn't die because of us. They didn't die in spite of us. They died because of a lethal emotional pain that had nothing to do with us. And placing that, you got to take that blame off your shoulders, and because it's too much weight for anybody to carry on any human shoulders. You got to recognize that you are valued, you're loved, and that suicide was not your fault.
And Kevin, I want to add to that for the people who have family members or friends that did die by suicide. Being someone who had a lived experience of what it's like to have the ideations and not go through with them, what I can tell you is the feeling was that there was a build, and you'll find out about my past in a second, of stress and trauma over time that changed the rationality of my thoughts. And so when I describe them as this magnetic feeling towards the pills, I'm not saying that every suicide happens this way, but for the sanity of the folks who have family members who died by suicide, I do want everyone to know that had I gone through with something in that moment, it was not something that I wanted to do. And that's a very hard concept for people to understand. It's not like my pet had just passed away, or I had a bad breakup, or someone in my family had just passed. Nothing bad had happened for those 2.5 years. It was this buildup in my system. And just like a Jenga tower takes one more piece and the tower topples over, that's what it felt like happened with me. Is I'm looking at these things. Sorry, say that again?
You felt compelled.
I felt compelled. And again, the only way to describe it is this magnetic pull. And so the fortunate thing was, to your point, the only safe place for me was at a psych ward at that point. And so I go to the psych ward, and I'm skipping a lot of the details. We could have a whole nother session on what a psych ward experience is like. But the thing to me that made me decide at first time ever that I wanted to start something when I got better is that I saw the attending psychiatrist first day when I was in the psych ward. She looked at my chart and she said, "Wow, Eric, 50 drug combinations and TMS therapy. You've tried everything." That was the first thing she said. Then she said, "Doing shock therapy is your last resort." And I don't want anyone to ever hear the term from a doctor, "This is your last resort," because I know that with you and I, back to your point about life is beautiful and finding reasons to live, and there are beautiful reasons to live when we heal, I would eat dirt if there's minerals in that dirt that could help me get better. But here I had someone who is top of the industry telling me that this one treatment was my last resort to get my brain shocked. Again, no problem with trying it. But the feeling was, if this doesn't work, my life is over. I've got nothing else to live for after that. And so I took her advice, and I did 5 weeks, 12 sessions of shock therapy. For those who don't know what shock therapy is, they put electrodes on your brain. They put you under general anesthesia, and they shock your brain into a seizure. The hope is, because there's not a lot of science behind it, that by inducing seizures, they'll reverse that way in which your brain is currently not firing through the neurons into the synapses and getting those messages across.
Completely retraining the brain.
Yeah.
So just in following up with your part of the story, I was in a similar situation in 2011, 60 days suicidal, 60 days of constant aggressive suicidal ideation. Luckily, I had been self-aware since my 3rd psych ward stay, and this was my 7th or 8th psych ward stay. So I walked myself into it with my family, with my wife, and said, "I need to be here. I won't be here." And at Langley Porter Hospital in San Francisco, I must thank them very much, because they had me in there for 60 days. They kept me in there, which they didn't, with insurance, they didn't have to do. And finally, the doctors come in and they say, "We don't know what else to do here. We've given you all the medication we can give you. We're going to look into electroconvulsive therapy." The first thing I said was, "You're not going to lobotomize me." And they said, "No, that's not how it works anymore. It's much more humane now, and we believe it can help you. It's our last resort." Same thing with you. I did 26 treatments of electroconvulsive therapy, which is twice the average, as you know, and the norm. And it was after the 6th session, I started my deep suicidal ideation began to shift. And it was after that, after the 26th session, that I felt stable enough to go home and be safe.
And by the way, how great is it? Like, 2 advocates talking with each other. One, the ECT, which you'll hear in the story in a second, did nothing for me. Had terrible situations after I woke from them. But for you, it helped, right? And so I think what's important for people to understand there is the terming of last resort. We don't want anyone to ever use that again.
I don't want to use that, no. But
that being said, TMS that didn't work for me, or ECT that didn't work for me, it might work for someone else. I think both of us are proponents of, there's a whole litany of things that we can try, and we don't want to be at the point where we're saying this is the only thing that's left for you, because I now have a library of things that I know that people can go to, not as doctors, but just as peer supporters in terms of pointing people in the right direction.
Well, let's talk about breathing for a minute. We both do it very well. We both take active steps to breathe and focus on our breathing on a regular basis, even a daily basis. When we live with, because I live with paranoid delusions, hallucinations, auditory and visual, severe depressions that are preceded by, or manic highs that are preceded by terrible depressions and downs. Those are the things I live with, along with anxiety attacks and panic attacks. But today, when I go through these things, I breathe. I breathe in my nose for 4 seconds. I release 8 seconds through pursed lips like a whistle but no sound. I do it 20 to 30 times, depending on how perilous the situation and how affected I am by the panic or the paranoia or the mania. And it brings my body to a calm. Here's why. That kind of breathing technique lowers your blood pressure, lowers your blood sugar, lowers your heart rate, lowers a panic attack, quells an anxiety attack, and can even lower an adrenaline rush. And so you do these things and it helps you. And yes, I said breathing techniques and proper breathing can lower your blood sugar if you have diabetes. This is great. If you have low blood pressure, it's not good to use this one. But if you don't, it's very healthy and helpful.
Well, and as I continue with the story, you'll see how much of a fan of breathing I am. The other piece of what breathing does is it stimulates the vagus nerve, probably the most important nerve in the entire body in terms of sending messages to the rest of your body, especially as we're talking about how everyone right now is going through the fear and the anxiety of the what if scenarios. We'll talk about how breathing can actually help you. So I left the hospital and I met a woman, serendipity as it is, and I got on her couch after thinking there were no other treatments to help me. She was the first practitioner in 2.5 years whose first question was, Eric, please tell me about your life. Whereas all the other practitioners before were, Eric, what are your symptoms? Yeah. Okay, based on your symptoms, here's how we can help you. And so just to show you how little I knew about mental health and how much I was probably affected, I didn't even know where to begin. So I said, I'm in the middle of 3 boys, older brother's 4 years older than me. Okay, let's talk about your older brother. And this is where things start to unravel, and hopefully my lived experiences and what I share will show people how similar it is to what we as a society are going through right now in this time period. I think that'll paint a good broad context of the similarities there. So my older brother, from the time I was 9 years old, for the next 20 years, he first broke his femur bone in a sporting accident, was in a body cast for a year, homeschool. A lot of people get into accidents. I understand that's not so perverse and out there. Heals from that. A month later, gets diagnosed with ALL, children's form of leukemia. 5 years of chemo, radiation, losing his hair, the time period when people thought that kids with cancer can give you cancer, so you can't get close to them. By the way, they call the cancer unit the cancer ward, just like they call the psych unit the psych ward right now. Wow. And they called cancer the big C back then, And so, but 5 years, miraculously, you knock on wood with the way the chemo was back then, even though it beat the crap out of his body, he goes into remission. A little bit later, he's driving in a Jeep with his friends, an open Jeep Wrangler. His friend had just gotten his permit, does this thing that kids do where you drive a little erratically because you think you're, cool for school at that point. And no seatbelts in the back. My brother flies out of the back of the Jeep, lands on his head, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eye, is in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college. Is at college, feeling a little pain in his knee. They do some testing. They find out that the ALL has come back. So now he's got to start on a stronger chemo regimen to really knock the shit out of the cancer out of his system. So those chemo treatments are really beating up his body. His temperature starts to go up. He wakes up with 105 fever. My parents rush him to the hospital. They find out that his body's going into septic shock, organs attacking themselves. That leads him into a coma. And for 3 months, this is now the late 90s at this point, we don't know whether or not he's ever going to wake from this coma, what his capabilities, what his faculties are going to be. And so I'm up at school driving back and forth from upstate New York at Cornell. My parents are living at the hospital every day, and the neurologist can't tell us what his long-term prognosis is. There's no way back then they were able to really see and know. But again, miraculously, he comes out of it. He's got his full capabilities, his full cognitive abilities about him, but his kidneys fail from the rigor of the septic shock. And so he has to go on dialysis. We all get tested. My father's the closest match. My father donates a kidney to him. That ends. We finally feel like we're in the clear. In the next year, 3 of my close friends, just between the ages of 29 and 30, all passed away of heart conditions unexpectedly. One of whose wife was pregnant, six weeks pregnant at the time. And so I'm sharing this story, and this woman, Donna, who I'm talking to, says to me, Eric, what else have you been through? She uses the term you. And I said, what do you mean what I've been through? This is stuff my brother's been through. This is stuff my friends have been through. This isn't stuff I've been through. And she kind of takes a deep breath, and she realizes she's dealing with someone who doesn't understand mental health at this point. And she says, Eric, do you care about your brother? Did you care about your friends? Did they matter to you? When you witness these things happen to other people, they are impacting you and your mental health. I deal with people who had friends who were in 9/11, who have family members who were in sex slave trades, who've lived through natural disasters. And in those, watching their family members go through those things, they themselves have become cognitively impaired. It's not to the level that you've been, but you've seen a lot over the course of your short life where this is all built up inside you. And so I stopped her at that point and I said, forget about my story for a second, Donna. And this is where it's going to lead to the breathing part, but I want you to chime in. I said, Donna, I go, forget about what happened with me. Job losses, breakups, divorces, bullying, cyberbullying, loss of loved ones, sickness of loved ones, global scares, Kobe Bryant thing, right? I know this wasn't at the time, but the loss of a major public figure. Said, if you're telling me the things that happen to people in our life impact us and our mental health, if we care about them, well, then who in the hell in this world hasn't had their mental health impacted?
Who hasn't experienced trauma?
Yes.
It's trauma.
Exactly. And we don't talk about trauma. We talk about disorder. We talk about 1 in 5. We talk about all people who have these diagnosable things, but we don't talk about the fact that every single one of us faces shit that affects this brain, body, central nervous system connection that we have.
Wow. And go ahead, please continue.
No. So she challenges me. She says, Eric, I appreciate that you're wondering about other people. Let's get you healthy first, and then we can start talking about others. So this is what you're going to love about the breathing thing, Kevin, is she sends me to this breathing course called The Art of Living for 3 days to a karate studio that got rented out, where this nonprofit organization teaches you how to breathe properly and stimulate that vagus nerve in your neck. And I show up, I'm the only man, only one under 40 at the time, and only one born in this country. So it's me, it's 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. Okay. And I'm a complete fish out of water. I'm like twice the size of these women. But I love asking questions. I love learning the science behind things. We talk about that all the time. Why do things work? And back to your point about breathing, this is what I took from that class. If you and I were sitting in the same room right now, that beautiful window that you've got behind you, and a car crashed into that window, didn't hurt us, but just lost control and crashed through that window, me, you, and Margaret would be like, oh, and we'd stop breathing for a second because we'd be in such shock that just happened. Okay. Well, we know, even though that happened once, the likelihood of a car coming through our window losing control is not that often. But take that same scenario and compare it to the child who has a mother who's facing a terminal cancer. The mother who has a child who's getting bullied every day and is worried about their kid, what they might do to themselves or what they're going to come home like, how they're going to be crying when they come home at night, right? The person who goes into work every single day and has a boss that's verbally abusive and has to worry about what is that situation going to be like every day. Well, essentially, each of those people, and that's only 3 examples of many examples that exist in this world, are the equivalent of that car coming through our window on an everyday basis. So for me, growing up, watching my brother go through all these things and my friend passing away, what I started to realize was, holy shit, like the way that I was breathing was expecting this bad thing to happen all the time. Well, when you're not breathing properly, this nerve, this vagus nerve in your neck, connected to your brain, connected to all these other processes in our body that you mentioned before, they get caught in these modes that are not healthy for us because our body is preparing for that bad scenario that might happen. Instead of saying, bad scenarios happen, I'll deal with it when it does happen, but I can go about my everyday life and chill and be okay in the moment and deal with it when it does happen. So by learning this breathing practice, for me, the greatest visual was thinking that this nerve runs through my neck. By breathing and stimulating it, I'm creating a greater, what they call vagal tone in my neck, like just like we have muscle tone. And that superhighway of the way that I breathe is now connected to all the other nerves in my body, where my body no longer has to be on edge thinking something bad is going to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day, because that's the way it's happened throughout my entire childhood. And so I did the breathing practice after leaving that course for 3 days. I did it for 30 days straight. They kept us on a text message thread with all my new 8 friends that I had met. And I wake up on the 30th day, and it was like a light switch had gone on. And I don't want it to be all, sunshine and rainbows for everyone saying that like my life was back to perfect. No, but the simple things that I didn't have before, the desire to watch TV, the desire to eat scrambled eggs for breakfast, they felt like, this is the way I describe it, it felt like watching Game 7 of my favorite team's playoff series. Because when you don't have those simple things that we take for granted, you don't have them for so long and they come back, they feel like miracles. And so the perspective that we gain when we go through these challenges is amazing, because you appreciate things so much more. And, very similar to you with sharing your story, Kevin, this is before we ever met. I go on LinkedIn and I write my story out after I start to feel a little bit better. It's a 35-minute read. And my friends who are digital marketers are telling me that I'm out of my mind for putting it up there. I didn't have Instagram or Twitter. So I put it on LinkedIn and I put it on Facebook. And LinkedIn shows in 3 days it gets read 150,000 times. It's just getting shared and shared and shared. And the bigger thing was I had over 400 calls that came in from as far as China in a 2-week period.
Wow.
And I know there's 400 because I saved the spreadsheet, right? Like you're certainly going to forget about those moments.
Right.
Back to your point about everyone goes through something. Here were the calls that I got. I didn't get calls from people saying, Eric, I have PTSD, just like it sounds like you have, which is what Donna, by the way, diagnosed me with. They didn't say, Eric, I have bipolar and it looks different than PTSD in this way. They were sharing with me the life challenges that they had been through, and now the way that it was manifesting itself in symptoms that sounded similar to what I had gone through. So 2 ends of the spectrum to share with people, just to show that different things affect each of us. One, there was a woman who called me and said, I was married to a beautiful husband for the last 10 years. We've got a beautiful house, white picket fence, amazing kids. But I broke up with my college boyfriend, and I wake up every day wondering if I ended up with the right person. Okay? Like, that's heavy stuff for a counselor and a therapist to deal with. I certainly wasn't prepared to deal with that. But what it told me was this person didn't go through something where a friend was in a car with them and passed away. This is someone who is obsessing about a thought that bothers them, and it's constantly like that car coming through the window. It's playing on them. It's playing on them. It's playing on them. Opposite end of the spectrum, someone calls me and says, I lost my child to SID, sudden infant death syndrome, 5 years ago, and I've never been the same. And every story was somewhere in between those stories. And it was all about these life experiences. And it was at that point that I realized the common thread that ties us together as human beings is not our disorder labels. It's not the medications that we take. It's that we all face these different set of challenges at different points in our lives. And those different challenges, they affect us, and they affect us to different levels. And that mental health should be a topic not for the 1 in 5 that we hear about all the time, that 1 in 5 people have this thing called mental illness. Yeah, I'm diagnosed with PTSD. Yeah, you're diagnosed with bipolar and other things. But if we treat this thing called mental health as just a 1 in 5 mental illness topic, and how often do we see mental health and mental illness interchangeably used? What happens is we leave out the majority of the population, all of whom are going through things also, and we don't talk about mental health on this continuum that we're all part of. And what's happening right now with the coronavirus and the way in which people are being affected is case in point that situational things that go on to us in our life affect mental health for everyone. And so how apropos that we're getting a chance to talk right now after the life experiences that we both have had, because I think this is shaking people because they're realizing, wait a second, I wasn't previously diagnosed with this thing called bipolar or this drug for this anti-anxiety medication, but holy shit, do I feel weird right now? And do I feel lost right now? What is this thing? Now, I think for the rest of our talk now, being able to talk about what these things are, what these feelings are, and how common they are, so that everyone else out there can feel better and learn coping mechanisms to be able to get through what they're going through.
100%. I think that This is a great starting point to a conversation, and I would love to find a way to have these conversations with you, maybe weekly or bi-weekly, where we talk about different topics related to our mental health, the mental health of America, the mental health of the globe, and how we talk about how to overcome and triumph over severe adversity, and how to find ways to cope with pain and live through the pain, in spite of the pain, despite of the pain, to thrive today. Before we wrap up, because we're at 40 minutes right now and I'll wrap up at 45, I want to talk to you about a couple of things, two more subjects. Well, the first being, I want you, if you can put in the comments section before we end this video, your article, if you can find that unlinked. If you have the link to that, make sure to either before or after the video is over, making sure that goes in the comments section.
The simplest way just to get it to people, if you go to samehereglobal.org, samehereglobal.org, go to the About Us page.
Okay.
It's the bottom link on the bottom of that page. It says Eric's original story.
So tell me, they go to the samehereglobal.org,
and then go to the About Us
page. Okay.
And it's the bottom link, the bottommost link on that page.
Bam. Okay, good. Now everyone has it.
Awesome.
So what I want to talk to you about in wrapping this up is, you mentioned before you had those breathing exercises that exercise the vagus nerve and change your perspective, you were in a state where you love nothing, like nothing, want nothing. And we know that, and we talked about this when we first met, that's an anhedonic state. And not a lot of people know what, I mean, I don't think the vast majority of people know what an anhedonic state is or what anhedonia is. Could you talk about that briefly for a moment?
And how apropos, again, given what's going on right now with what we don't have access to, even if we're not going through something major mental health related, things have been taken away from us. So oftentimes when we've been in school, we're told that depression means sadness. Some people feel sadness with depression. Here's what I felt with my depression. It's much more broad reaching and wide ranging than that. To me, depression is a lack of, an inability to, a flatlining of, meaning there's no ability to get up for things. I watch my teams on TV and all it looks like is a yellow team playing a red team. I see my mother coming down the street. It doesn't feel like hugging her would be any different than hugging a lamppost. I see my pet and I want to walk my dog. Seeing my dog, as much as I love my dog, I don't get this up feeling when they jump on me and they give me a hug. So anhedonia is this inability to feel an up feeling, a desire, an interest, a passion for anything. And so you now take that and you take what's going on with, Kev, are you still there? Because I see the screen looked a little frozen. You good? I could see you talking. It's just a little, should I keep going? Okay. So this anhedonia is something that literally paralyzes us. And for people right now who are faced with a misunderstanding, I shouldn't say misunderstanding, not knowing whether or not school is going to start at a certain point, not knowing whether or not work is going to start at a certain point, not knowing where their next paycheck is going to come from, not knowing what their routine is tomorrow. The challenge is that they can't see the next day, 2 days, 3 days in front of them. So it's very hard for them to get motivated and to understand in this world where they feel like they're kind of floating, what to do next. And so very similar to that anhedonic feeling that we've had when we've gone through it, more from a buildup of the stress and trauma combined with our genetics and our system, as opposed to a situational thing that's going on right now where literally people can't go and do those things. I think there's a lot of commonality between the two. And I don't know if it makes sense to get into this one or we wait for the next one, but there's things that we've learned and have had to learn in terms of how to adapt so that we can live in these situations where we can't feel those things, because we can't just lay in a bed and hope and pray for it to go away. We have to develop strategies to help us to get over these things. Kev, I can't hear you. can't hear you. What a type. Are you able to hear me? Still looking. You can hear me? You can hear me? Give me up or down for hear me. Oh, okay. Okay. I can't hear you, but I'll I can't hear you. I can't hear you. All right, I'll wrap up. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, this is a conversation that we need to keep having. I know we just touched the surface on all the ways in which, you know, this has impacted our lives, the way in which we see the world in a similar way and are hoping to help a lot of people, the way in which it impacts everyone in a slightly different way, but even within those differences, there's so many similarities. And so to get a chance to work together in the hope of helping as many people as possible, I think especially at a time when, because of what's going on in our world, so many people are feeling so many similar things because of the fear of what's next in the what if scenarios, that there's a lot of help that we can bring to people. And I'll look forward to getting out to everyone how often we can do this and get together, hopefully be able to take questions before we get on, while we're on, and all the above, and really be able to move the conversation forward. Thanks so much, brother. Should I close off?